next presentation is by Ms. San Nicolas. Ha'åni San Nicolas is a Chamorro and Samoan scholar and activist born and raised in Guahan. In 2019, she received 2 bachelor's degrees in general biology and ethnic studies from the University of California, San Diego. Ha'åni is a current PhD student at the University of Hawaii in Manoa, studying indigenous politics. And she also works as a Chamorro language and culture specialist at the Comisión Ifino Chamorro. Ms. San Nicolas's presentation is entitled Fatto Famalao'an, Reimagining Chamorro Womanhood in the Decolonization of Guahan. Please welcome Ha'åni San Nicolas.
Okay, so Hafere Toru, my name is Ha'åni San Nicolas. The title of my paper that I will be sharing with you all today is Fatto Famalao'an, Reimagining Chamorro Womanhood in the Decolonization of Guahan. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is just about me, and we already talked about it. The next slide that I'm going to share with you is a poem that I wrote specifically for this paper. This work is very personal to me, so it just makes sense for me to share a piece of me with you on with my paper. And I'm going to read it out and everyone can follow along, but this poem is a poem for Famalao'an. Nana, mother, daughter of Mele, with a voice that could calm even the roughest of seas, I cry into your arms, releasing the darkest parts of me, the broken parts of me, of my heart, of my soul, what he did to me. Your embrace envelops me like the ia lava lava bound tightly to your waist. You say our women have to be strong, as if this phrase has been whispered from the lips of your mother and your mother's mother and all the mothers of Pacifica. Words meant to console me, to comfort me, but I am tired of hearing this again and again. Mom, why am I only called strong when I am shattered? Never when I'm not, never when I'm just me. Only strong after I list my traumas like accolades and trophies I display proudly on a shelf. Only strong after the fact, never before, never without. Nana, mother, daughter of Mele, I dreamt of a child that bears your name and calls me mother, and you her mother's mother, and all the mothers of Pacifica hers. But I do not whisper into her ears as those have done before us. Instead, Huguaifi I Kulu. I blow the conch shell loudly. Our women are strong because they are. I tell her of Fu'una, Fotna, and Fua, how she created the universe from her brother's dying body, and then our ocean from her tears, and then our people from her body willingly. I tell her of the brave Famalao'an who wove together their neni hair as a net to protect our home, Guahan, from being totally consumed by a monstrous fish. I tell her of Mele, my Samoan grandmother, the daughter of high chiefs in Utule, who raised my mother, who raised me, who now raises you. I tell her this so if anyone ever tells her that she is strong, I know that she'll smile because she's known that all along. Okay, next slide. So my brief introduction and driving questions. Ancient Chamorro society in Guahan is noted to be especially matrilineal, which is evident in customs where the family carried the woman's clan name and where wealth and title were passed down through the Famalao'an line. It's also the case that ancient Chamorro Famalao'an held more caste status and social mobility in comparison to Lalahi. However, much of our ancestral knowledge and traditional practices changed in 1521, marking the beginning of a colonial retelling and reshaping of Chamorro culture, which includes our conception of womanhood. Our violent colonization transformed the value of Chamorro women as influential leaders in their own right to gendered, matrifocal figures responsible for upholding domesticity and religious morality, which I believe continues to shape how we understand womanhood in Guahan today. Next slide. There has been an abundance of Chamorro academic work being done in recent years with regards to colonial histories, revitalization, and most notably decolonization. Despite this, Chamorro scholar Dr. Laura Sauter, also known as Sina Lo, notes in her book, Daughters of the Island, Contemporary Chamorro Women Organizers in Guam, scholarship on Chamorro women is virtually non-existent. Only a handful of studies have given partial attention to Chamorro women, and their experiences and contributions remain unrecorded. Sina Lo's work continues to remain as one of the sole pieces of literature that sheds light on the lives of Chamorro women. Nevertheless, it dates nearly 3 decades old, and all the activists in the text conform to the quote, continued importance and influence of the Catholic Church in the lives of Chamorro women, and quote, central to the existence of all Chamorro women are 2 essential ingredients of identity, being Chamorro and being female, end quote. In 2019, the first maga'håga of Guåhan, Luliang Guerrero, was elected into office, the same year that the island's legislature held the first congressional women majority in the history of the United States. The catchphrase, "The future is Famalao'an," rose to popularity amidst the excitement and promise of Chamorro women leadership. However, just as Sinaloa notes that Chamorro women remain historically hidden, I believe that the subject of a Famalao'an future, particularly what it means and what it entails, is also too often neglected within scholarship, especially within discussions of decolonization today. Next slide. To confidently claim a Famalao'an future, we must first have critical work done to actively invite and engage Chamorro women and womanhood into the conversation. This may seem redundant to many Chamorros since our women continue to hold prominent status and establish power compared to other areas of the world. Following the words of several Famalao'an in the text, quote, "We do not need to be liberated," end quote. I, on the other hand, believe that our decolonization efforts are worthless if we do not seek liberation for our women, who are the very pillar of Chamorro culture. I argue that this understanding of Chamorro womanhood, which is empowering to many, has combined with colonization in a manner that denies women outside a heteronormative or heteropatriarchal performance of motherhood, literally through reproductive childbirth or figuratively through practices such as poksai. This understanding of women is then limited to roles that focalize motherhood, which harmfully places Famalao'an who do not engage with this notion in the margins of kostumbren Chamorro, along with movements for Chamorro liberation altogether. As an Indigenous woman, I'm constantly reminded that the personal is political. Last year, I was confiding with another woman from Guahan, telling her about something that was on my mind. And she told me that women of the Pacific were made to carry things like this. I asked myself, why is my existence dependent on my suffering? Colonization has collapsed a more expansive understanding of Chamorro womanhood to subjects of motherhood. I believe that it has also redefined the experience of Famalao'an to be one that is inextricable from pain. I wonder then what would happen if we choose to move away from these limitations of womanhood. Most importantly, what do we, the Famalao'an of the Marianas, want womanhood to look like, act like, and mean in the decolonization of our homeland? Next slide. So hence the title of my paper, Fatto Famalao'an, which translates to "Come Women" or "Arrive Women." And I believe it's the precursory step necessary toward both our liberation and a Famalao'an future. Employing this framework requires an active invitation to all those who identify as Chamorro women outside its gendered bounds. Although there are many brilliant and inspirational women figures at the forefront of our movements today, I believe that more work must be done to engage with Chamorro women and gender nonconforming individuals who do not fit into this traditional role of motherhood. Fattu is a future marker of come, so come to or show up. Therefore, in a more metaphorical context, Fatto Famalao'an is not only an inclusive gathering call of women to reimagine their identity, but it is also the anticipation, excitement, and distant resurgence of Chamorro Famalao'an to be the maga'håga that they were always meant to be. So with this paper, I am not condemning Famalao'an who embrace motherhood or diminishing the role of mothers in kostumbren Chamorro. Without mothers, we would not have future generations of Chamorros to protect our land and water or to perpetuate our language and culture. Rather, this work is rooted in our most sacred values of Inafat Malik and Inagwaidza, as it explores alternative ways to build a more nuanced and expansive future for our Famalao'an, especially those who identify as queer, trans, or non-binary. So next slide. To ground this articulation of Fatto Famalao'an, then, I look to the tradition of Kåntan Chamorrita. Chamorro scholar Craig Paris dictates that Kåntan Chamorrita creates a space for poets to sing forward and backward, to bring the past, present, and future into being. In this manner, I look to contemporary poems written by Chamorro women and gender non-binary individuals as a source of knowledge in navigating the reimagination of Chamorro womanhood. Next slide. So Kåntan Chamorrita, or Chamorrita for short, is traditionally a 4-line verse, each line adding 8 syllables, with the second and fourth line rhyming. A second poet then responds by repeating the last 2 lines and adding a new rhyming couplet. And this exchange continues back and forth until one poet discontinues the repetition. The Chamorrita was not just limited to 2 single participants. In moments of large gatherings with a lot of people, they were able to join in and dialogue with the performers. In the 1600s, Spanish clergy in the Marianas noted how the Chamorrita operated as a venue for debate. This style of debate versus is known as adzoti, which is indicative of traditional exchanges of communication between clans. The adzoti is emblematic of Chamorro poeticism, as metaphors presented words of apparent innocence on the surface, with a special hidden meaning for the intended receiver. For a large number of reasons having to do with colonization, the Chamorrita in all its customary glory is not as evident today as it once was. However, the Chamorrita now remains steadfast through the weavings of Chamorro written poetry, from which contemporary Chamorro poets create a new communal situation to protest colonization and revitalize our Chamorro culture. Next slide. So with all that information, there's two questions that I have in moving forward. One, what happens when Famalao'an refuse to uphold colonial introductions of motherhood and pain, which is something that is arguably deeply embedded within our culture? And what space will we claim in a decolonized Guåhan, and how do we begin creating the space? These questions require resurgence and imagination. Resurgence places Chamorro practices at the center of our liberation, and reimagination uses the intellect generated from this to create boundless Famalao'an possibilities. The stories of our women may be hidden and lost to colonization, but the answers that we seek to find live on in our language, in our culture, and within ourselves. I believe that the Chamorrita and poetry holds valuable information that can ground and guide us, motnas and tati. Like the histories of Famalao'an, the traditional Chamorrita is rarely seen or practiced, but its essence lives on in the written and spoken poetry coming from the people of the Marianas today, particularly in the ideas of maga'håga and mamatanian of Famalao'an. Next slide. So one Chamorro term used to identify women is maga'håga na Famalao'an. This descriptor can refer to the mental or physical, or can even describe one's resilience and courage. As fellow Chamorro academic Leana Nahalova'a writes, reclaiming the word maga'håga and expanding its definition means including the support that the woman receives from her kin and family, the freedom and ability to choose to exit a toxic relationship, to demonstrate sexual agency, and to wield inherent custodial rights over her children. Maga'håga na Famalao'an then fosters a sense of strength that is not dependent on suffering, but instead reflects a celebration of agency. This idea of womanhood is not confined to one definition, but instead reflects the overall dynamicism of our women. Next slide. The poetry from Cecilia C.T. Perez's dissertation, Signs of Being, A Chamorro Spiritual Journey, is very profound, as her words situate moments at the intersection of indigeneity and womanhood through a worldview of a writer who has lost her physical sight. Her poem, Sky Cathedral, alludes to the prevalence of Catholicism in Guahan and Costumbren Chamorro. With this first line, she says, Nana lives in jeweled nights, stars like candles lit in a sky cathedral. As she prays with angels and the sound of wind, she prays for me. When Perez then follows this with a citation of the first line, Ave Nanenzuas, or Hail, Mother of God, it is even more obvious as to how deeply interconnected motherhood and Catholicism are within Chamorro culture. However, I would instead say that the author's religious references position Famalao'an as powerful and almost godly agents in their own rights. And it is from the church that Chamorro women negotiate a sense of strength and self in contest to colonization. In conveying this idea of Famalao'an carving spaces within colonial structures like the church, Perez locates ancestral Chamorro symbolism among Catholic allusions within Sky Cathedral. For instance, in this second part here, she says, I find Nana in Gualafun, dancing night in a field of lati, singing dreams to me. Gualafun is an ancient Chamorro word for a full moon phase, a symbol that is evident throughout Costumbren Chamorro in many ways. A more culturally revered element is the lati that traditionally held up homes. Ancient Chamorros ceremoniously buried their family members under the lati, which today serve as indicators of sites where a tatomona reside. Writing Nana in connection to such powerful marks of ancient Chamorro culture should not be taken lightly. By doing this, she positions the strength of Famalao'an as both an embodied knowledge and innate force, just like the elements of nature. She portrays an understanding of Famalao'an that does not just prescribe to colonialism, but pulls from an ancestral form of honoring the natural fortitude that exists within us. Next slide. So one of my favorite Indigenous scholars, Leanne Simpson, writes that we must center queerness in order to eliminate the risk of replicating the marginalization of women, children, and two-spirit queer people in decolonization. So celebrating the breadth of sexuality is thus critical to a Famalao'an future because it fundamentally challenges heteropatriarchies and colonization. It is not a mere tool of inclusivity in conceptualizing womanhood, but it is entirely liberatory. Another descriptor of Chamorro women is Matatnya na Famalao'an. This suggests a type of intrinsic strength, just as Maga'håga na Famalao'an does, but it differs slightly as it describes women that are bold, resolute, and are unapologetically fearless in their defiance of convention. I hold this understanding of Famalao'an as an act of refusal that acknowledges the identity of womanhood, not through a binary, but rather situated in an ocean of defiance. Next slide. Guma Gela recently published a zine that includes this poem Promise, written by Mary Ha'åni. This poem begins with, I've been mothered 4 times, each time redefined what it means to be descendant, to be connected, to have purpose, to know devotion. The author then thanks their genealogy of women for acting as stars that pin together on a cosmic map to form a constellation. Alluding again to starry skies, they explain that their story as a queer Chamorro was a story of an astrological outlier, since there seemed to be no traditional space for them. If cosmology is viewed as a way to understand our ancestors as they were experts of wayfinding, then Ha'åni failing to find themselves written in the stars either points to the lack of similar stars in our history or the absence of a more limitless constellation of Famalao'an. In the same paragraph, they write, to be unfamiliar to family, seemingly so unlike the matriarchs and those who mothered them, these expose the conflict in being someone that is unfamiliar and unlike their traditional matriarchs within kostumbren Chamorro. Next slide. However, the author writes this, in the back of my mind, my dreams have always turned to how I will continue a nurturing tradition, how I too am learning, gathering, spinning, weaving fibers of my own. Perhaps even I will become a map to a generation. The way that Ha'åni brings nurture into the conversation is not in a conventional mode of mothering, but is a focus inward and toward a healing of the self, of the queer astrological outlier in the cosmic map of women. This section shows the defiance of Matatnya na Famalao'an because it shows, for one, a rejection of a nurturing tradition, and second, it exhibits the great and power our women have to remap our future. Next slide. And this is just another part that I really liked. We have always loved with this abundance as if it was all we ever needed, as if we might always return to the sea. This is the gift of returning home, woven by matriarchs, carried across oceans. I will hold it sacred and hold my own presence sacred. Next slide. So Ha'åni's poem was published weeks after I crafted a poem for Famalao'an, the beginning of this piece. Although our works embody totally different lived experiences of womanhood, their words speak to mine as if we were conversing through our writing. I place Ha'åni's poem alongside my own in a way that brings us forward and backward together. I read them line by line in a manner that resembles the Kåntan Chamorrita of our Tatamona. It was as if they began the Chamorrita, and then I heard them and responded, and together we said, Famalao'an are sacred. Queerness is sacred, we are sacred. Perhaps this is how we begin reimagining ourselves as Famalao'an, by honoring the sacredness in ourselves and among our connections to one another. Though many forms of traditional Chamorro ways of understanding the world have been lost, the embodied knowledge of our ancestors in the past can be found within words of the present in order to create a better future for Famalao'an to come. Okay. So to conclude, in a webinar from Ihagan Famalao'an back in November, I asked Sinaloa how Chamorros reclaim Fino Hadza, whether it be in words, practices, or even perceptions of women that have been lost to colonization. She responded, for a long time, we have seemed to have lost our sense of agency. We seem to have disconnected with the reality that we are co-creators of our history, our language, and our culture, that we have every right to interpret and reintroduce words that connect us with traditional practices. As Chamorros, we must invoke this agency as an act of resistance, but as maga'håga, we have to decide for ourselves the kinds of stories of womanhood that we want created or recreated. Next slide. So I want to end by citing my kumu, Kanakamali scholar, Jamaica Osorio. Our scars bear witness to our trauma, but do not define our experience or our possibilities. So in speaking with you all today and inviting Chamorro Famalao'an to reimagine womanhood, I hope that together we can take on this call to share our stories and fight for our liberation and that of generations of women to come, a truly Famalao'an future. Tidus ma'asi and malalava.
Thank you, Ha'åni. I don't know if you had a chance to see the chat as you were speaking, but you have some very enthusiastic responses. people noting that they love the presentation. So thank you for that.